Okay, so the project I'm going to start working on right now is getting my fuel cell installed in the car. My plan is to have it between these two bars and have it up high enough so that the fuel outlets aren't really low under the bumper, they're kind of tucked up. Now, I bought a Speedmaster fuel cell, the 13-gallon version, because it's advertised at 17 by 20 by 9. And the space between my bars here is like 17 and, I don't know, 3/4. So in theory, 17-inch fuel cell should be able to slide up and down, and then I can build a firewall around it. Well, I take the fuel cell, I hold it like this. You can see it's not dropping in between those two rails. The reason why it's not dropping in between those two rails, quite simply, it's because it's 18 inches. So, what are my options? My options are, build the floor out, mount it on top, which I'm not too keen about. I want to put it a little bit lower in the car. If I have it, obviously this is backwards, but if I have it above the fuel rail, if we just flip this around here, hopefully this will show. If I try and have this on top, the fuel outlets are on top of the rear cage bar. And the problem is, if I just try and mount this as is underneath, the tank sits what I consider to be way low in the car. So, what are the choices here? One of the choices was I could send this fuel cell back, get a different one. But I bought this from Jegs, and trying to send this back to the US is almost more effort than it's worth. I could try to sell this locally, buy a new one. And I didn't think of this myself, I talked to a couple of my car buddies and they said, why don't you just modify the tank? Well, yeah, why don't I just modify the tank? I can TIG weld, and I've been doing a ton of other fabrication. So what the plan is, I'm not going to cut on this side because we got a fuel sender, we got our other fittings. I'm going to cut a nice L out of here. So it's going to come down 5 or 6 inches. I got a 6-inch chunk of aluminum. Like aluminum here. It's going to come down either 5 or 6 inches. Haven't quite decided yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut in 5 inches. So to about here, it's just over half the tank. Well, maybe I'll do 4.5, half the tank. And I'm going to come in 1 inch. And what I'll do is then I'll kind of push this up from the bottom and see where the fuel outlets are lining up in relation to the rear of the car. So after I get that sorted out, the next problem I got to solve is how do I mount this in the car? I got no floor. I could build a floor. But I'm thinking my initial plan of attack is going to be, I'm going to build some brackets that attach to this bar and this bar. And then what I can do is I can weld some brackets onto here. Essentially cut these brackets off and just move them up to here. And then what that allows me to do is by having these brackets in the middle, these brackets on the end, I can have one piece of steel on either side that go the full length. And then what I can do is just attach it to the brackets here, move it over, slide it up, and then slide them on top of the brackets, so I can install this by myself. On the inside of these tanks they have this foam which helps keeps the fuel at the bottom of the tank and the sump filled. So I need to take all that foam out of there. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to undo all these bolts around the cover, pull this plastic cover off, and then squeeze the foam and pull it out. Alright, so now that we've got all of the foam out of the cell, we can start cutting on this without having to worry about damaging that at all. Alright, well, I've got cut lines on the tank. Next step is to cut. Alright, so we have the fuel cell cut. Now we're going to go test fit it in the car and make sure it fits and see if I need to cut it back or deeper. Okay, so I got my cell deburred. The two pieces I'm going to cut out, I've got them measured. I just held it in place here. And then with the marker on the back side, traced around both sides. As you can see, this piece on the front, it's a little bit long, okay? It's a little bit long. But what I'm going to do is I'll weld it onto the back piece, set the whole thing in place, and then mark off the front line, and I can trim it as needed. Okay, so I have this 4.5-inch piece fit up pretty well to the cell, well enough that I can definitely weld this. But I still need to tack this bottom piece onto this. So for that, I'm going to clamp it onto my fab table here, which I've already done. This will just sit right in behind it. I can have a couple of magnets on the back side so that this is all perfectly 90 degree. Tack these together. We're in business. So while I was welding this, I had the bottom piece clamped to the table because I didn't want it to warp. But what I didn't think about was the top piece pulling in. And I didn't really notice it until near the very end. But it's definitely not 90 degrees, it's pulled over. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do is I'll tack the top and I'll see if I can bend this a little bit while it's mounted. And if not, I should be able to fill the little gap pretty easily. Not ideal, but it should work. So you can see with that piece just resting in how angled up the front is. I'm not too concerned about it. I think I'll be able to weld it pretty well. I'm also going to tack up the top piece so it's solid against the back, and then what I'll try and do is get a couple of clamps to maybe just bend it down a little bit. Just need to cut this front lip off. Now I should be good to weld this to the cell. Okay, so I've got the fit up on this piece here. As you can see, the front piece is just a little tiny bit below the top of this. Same thing on the side, it's a little bit on the inside. The top down when I push this in, just a little bit inside. I think that's what I want. I'm going to tack this up, corner, top, corner, middle, and then see if I can get a clamp on the bottom here, pull this together and get that a little bit closer, but if not, I think I can deal with that gap in there, no problem. So here we have the fuel cell molded up. Molds may not look perfect, but it should hold. I'll fill it up with water and make sure that does, make sure nothing leaks out over a couple days. Well, shit. Luckily that's the side I'm going to be modifying anyway. In any case, still got this chunk of aluminum.